The howling wind carried Abigail Duncan's screams across the frozen streets of Downeyville, California, but no one seemed to hear, or perhaps no one cared to listen. It was December of 1859, and the mining town nestled in the Sierra Nevada mountains was experiencing one of the harshest winters on record. Snow piled in drifts taller than a man, and the temperature had plummeted so low that the creek running through town had frozen solid. "Please." Abigail pounded her fists against the heavy wooden door of the Golden Nugget Saloon. "Mr. Hargrove, you can't do this." From inside, Vernon Hargrove's cold voice cut through a gap in the doorframe. "I told you what would happen if you couldn't pay, girl. The Golden Nugget ain't a charity, and I ain't your savior." Abigail's hands were already turning red from the cold and the pounding. She'd been working as a singer at the saloon for 3 months, ever since she'd arrived in town with nothing but the clothes on her back and a dream of making enough money to buy passage to San Francisco. But when she'd fallen ill last week with a terrible fever, she'd missed 6 nights of work. Now Hargrove was demanding she pay for her room regardless. "I'll make it up. I can work extra shifts. Please, Mr. Hargrove, you know I will." Through the frosted window, she could see the warm glow of the oil lamps and the shadowy figures of miners and gamblers going about their evening without a care for her predicament. A few glanced toward the door, but no one made a move to help. "Consider this a lesson in financial responsibility," Hargrove called out, his voice muffled by the door and the howling wind. "Maybe a night in the cold will teach you that nothing comes free in this world." The lock clicked with terrible finality, and Abigail heard his boots retreating across the wooden floor inside. She wasn't dressed for the weather, just a thin dress and a shawl that did almost nothing against the biting cold. Her coat was inside, along with everything else she owned. Tears froze on her cheeks as she realized the gravity of her situation. In this weather, a person could freeze to death in a matter of hours. Abigail stumbled away from the door, her mind racing. The boarding house was on the other side of town, and she knew Mrs. Hollister wouldn't take her in without money up front. The church might offer sanctuary, but the pastor and his wife had gone to Sacramento for supplies 3 days ago and weren't due back for a week. The wind cut through her like a knife, and she hugged herself, trying desperately to maintain some warmth. She hadn't fully recovered from her illness, and already she could feel her strength waning. The street was nearly deserted, with most townsfolk wisely taking shelter from the deadly cold. She made it halfway down the street before her legs began to shake uncontrollably. A violent coughing fit doubled her over, and when she straightened, black spots danced before her eyes. Abigail knew she wouldn't last much longer outside. In desperation, she turned back toward the saloon. Maybe there was a shed or storage room around back where she could find shelter. As she rounded the corner of the building, the wind hit her full force, nearly knocking her off her feet. She braced herself against the wall, inching along until she reached the back of the saloon. There was indeed a small storage shed, but to her dismay, it was secured with a heavy padlock. A stack of crates provided minimal shelter from the wind, and Abigail crouched behind them, tucking her hands into her armpits and drawing her knees to her chest. She was so cold now that she'd stopped shivering, a dangerous sign, she knew. As her eyes grew heavy, a terrible peace began to settle over her. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to just close her eyes for a moment, just a brief rest. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered in her fading consciousness. A horse whinnied, followed by the crunch of boots on snow. "Hello, is someone there?" A deep voice called out. Abigail tried to respond, but her voice was a mere whisper lost to the wind. "I saw something move over here." The voice was closer now, With her last bit of strength, Abigail raised a hand weakly above the crates. "Good Lord!" The man's voice was alarmed now. He rushed forward, and suddenly a face appeared above her, a face framed by a worn Stetson, with concerned blue eyes and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "Miss, can you hear me?" Abigail tried to nod, but she wasn't sure if she managed it. She felt strong arms lifting her, and then she was being carried. "You're half frozen. We need to get you warm right away." Through blurry vision, she saw they were approaching the side of the saloon. The man stopped at a window and peered inside. "Looks like the back room," he muttered. "Nobody in there." He set her down gently, propping her against the wall. "Cover your face, miss." Before she could ask why, he'd removed his pistol from its holster and used the butt to smash the window glass. The crash seemed thunderous in the quiet night, and Abigail flinched at the sound. The man quickly cleared away the remaining shards from the frame, then removed his coat and draped it over the sill to protect against any remaining glass. "I apologize for the unconventional entry," he said, scooping her up again. "But I reckon saving your life is worth a broken window." With surprising gentleness for his size, he lifted Abigail through the window and then climbed in after her. The sudden warmth of the room made her skin prickle painfully. Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "Nathan Wright," he said, removing his hat. "Recently of Colorado territory, currently passing through." "And you are?" "Abigail Duncan," she replied, her teeth beginning to chatter as feeling returned to her limbs. I work here, or I did. The owner locked me out." Nathan's expression darkened. "Locked you out, in this weather? That's not just cruel, it's attempted murder." Shouts came from the front of the saloon. Someone had heard the breaking glass. Nathan helped Abigail to a chair just as the door burst open and Vernon Hargrove appeared, shotgun in hand, followed by two of his regular customers. "What in the hell?" Hargrove began, then stopped when he saw Abigail. "How did you get back in here, girl?" "I brought her in," Nathan said calmly, though his hand rested near his pistol. "Found her nearly frozen to death outside." "This ain't your concern, stranger," Hargrove said, raising his shotgun slightly. "This woman owes me money, and until she pays, she ain't welcome here." "So you figured you'd let her freeze instead?" Nathan's voice was dangerously quiet. "In my experience, dead people don't pay their debts." The standoff lasted several seconds, with neither man blinking. Finally, one of the customers, an older miner named Jenkins, stepped forward. "Put the gun down, Vern. You've had too much to drink. The girl was sick, for heaven's sake." "Stay out of this, Jenkins," Hargrove snapped. "No, I won't," Jenkins replied firmly. "I've kept my mouth shut about a lot of things in this place, but I draw the line at leaving a girl to die in the cold." The other customer, a car dealer named Simmons, nodded in agreement. "It ain't right, Vern." Hargrove's face flushed with anger, but he slowly lowered his shotgun. "Fine. She can warm up, but she's out in the morning, and I want payment for that broken window." "I'll cover the window," Nathan said. "As for the lady, she's coming with me to find proper lodging for the night." "And where might that be?" Hargrove sneered. "Town's full up with the miners from the Excelsior camp coming in for supplies. Not a room to be had." "Then I'll figure something else out," Nathan replied evenly. "Either way, she's not staying where she's not wanted." Hargrove glared at them both, then turned and stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. Jenkins approached Abigail, concern written across his weathered features. "You all right, Miss Abigail? You still look mighty pale." "I'll be okay," she said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. Her limbs felt like lead, and despite the warmth of the room, she couldn't stop shaking. "Let me get your things," Jenkins offered. "I know which room is yours." While Jenkins went upstairs, Nathan found a blanket and wrapped it around Abigail's shoulders. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. "I think so," she replied, though when she tried to stand, her legs wobbled dangerously. Nathan caught her before she could fall. "Easy there. We'll take it slow." Jenkins returned with a small carpet bag. "This all you got, Miss Abigail?" She nodded. "I travel light." "Always the way of it for singers," Jenkins said with a kind smile. "You sure got a voice that don't match your size, though. Like a songbird she is," he added to Nathan. "Best we've had in Downeyville since I can remember." Despite her situation, Abigail felt a flush of pride at the compliment. Her singing was the one thing she had complete confidence in, a gift from her mother, who had sung in churches across Pennsylvania before consumption took her when Abigail was 15. "I'm sure she's remarkable," Nathan replied, and something in his tone made Abigail look up at him. There was a warmth in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a curiosity that went beyond mere concern for her well-being. "Mr. Jenkins," Nathan continued, "do you know of anywhere Miss Duncan might stay tonight? I'm new to town myself, just arrived this afternoon." Jenkins scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Might be Mrs. Sullivan would take you both in. Her boys are grown and gone, and she's got rooms to spare. She's a God-fearing woman who don't turn away those in need." "And where might we find Mrs. Sullivan?" Nathan asked. "End of Pine Street, blue house with the white trim. Can't miss it." Nathan nodded his thanks. "Miss Duncan, if you'll permit me, I think it's best if I carry you. You're still too weak to walk through that cold." Under normal circumstances, Abigail would have refused. Propriety demanded it, but these were far from normal circumstances, and she was indeed still very weak. She nodded her agreement. Jenkins helped wrap another blanket around her for the journey, and Nathan lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. With her carpetbag in one hand and Abigail cradled against his chest, Nathan headed for the door. "My horse is tied out front," he told her. "We'll ride to Mrs. Sullivan's. It'll be faster and keep you warmer." The blast of cold air as they exited the saloon made Abigail gasp, but Nathan moved quickly to where a large chestnut gelding was hitched to the rail. With impressive strength, he managed to mount while still holding her, settling her sideways across his lap. "Hold tight," he murmured, and she didn't need to be told twice. She clung to him as he guided the horse through the snowy streets, the animal's powerful muscles working beneath them. Despite the brutal cold, Abigail felt a strange sense of safety in this stranger's arms. She didn't know anything about Nathan Wright, but he had saved her life tonight, and there was a steadiness to him that calmed her racing thoughts. "We're almost there," he said after a few minutes. The blue house, just as Jenkins described. Mrs. Sullivan turned out to be a small, energetic woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and kind eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Abigail's pallor and Nathan's protective stance and ushered them inside without hesitation. "Lord have mercy, child, you're half frozen," she exclaimed, helping Nathan settle Abigail on a sofa near the fire. "Margaret," she called over her shoulder, and a young woman appeared from the kitchen. "Heat water for a bath, quickly, and bring the medicinal brandy from the pantry." While Margaret hurried to do as instructed, Mrs. Sullivan turned her attention to Nathan. "And who might you be, young man?" "Nathan Wright, madam. I'm new in town. I found Miss Duncan locked out of the saloon where she works. She was near frozen when I came across her." Mrs. Sullivan's expression darkened. "Vernon Hargrove did this. That man has a black heart." She turned back to Abigail, her face softening. "You poor dear. You'll stay here tonight and we'll sort everything out in the morning." "I can't pay you," Abigail admitted, ashamed. "Not right away. That's why Mr. Hargrove locked me out. I missed work due to illness," and Mrs. Sullivan waved away her concerns. "Nonsense. I don't turn away people in need, especially not in weather like this. The good Lord would have something to say about that, I expect." Margaret returned with a glass of brandy, which Mrs. Sullivan insisted Abigail drink. The liquid burned going down but spread a welcome warmth through her chest. "The bath will be ready soon," Margaret informed them. "I've put it in the small room off the kitchen where it's warmest." "Thank you," Abigail said gratefully. Nathan, who had been standing somewhat awkwardly by the door, cleared his throat. "If you ladies will excuse me, I should find lodging for myself as well. I'm glad to see Miss Duncan in good hands." "Nonsense," Mrs. Sullivan said firmly. "You'll stay here too. I've a spare room upstairs that my son Thomas used to occupy. It's small, but it's warm and clean." Nathan hesitated. "I wouldn't want to impose. It's not an imposition if I'm offering," Mrs. Sullivan interrupted. "Besides, the boarding house is full, as is the hotel. Unless you fancy sleeping in the livery stable with your horse, you'd best accept my hospitality." A small smile curved Nathan's lips. "When you put it that way, madam, I accept with gratitude." "Good. Now sit down and warm yourself while I check on that bath." Once Mrs. Sullivan had left the room, a somewhat awkward silence fell between Abigail and Nathan. She realized she knew nothing about this man who had saved her life, and yet here they were, about to share lodgings. "I never properly thanked you," she said finally, meeting his gaze. "You saved my life, Mr. Wright. I'm forever in your debt." Nathan removed his hat and ran a hand through his light brown hair. "No debt necessary, Miss Duncan. Any decent person would have done the same." "But they didn't," she pointed out softly. "You did." He looked slightly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "I was in the right place at the right time, that's all." He paused, then asked, "If you don't mind my asking, how did you come to be in Downeyville? You don't strike me as someone born to mining towns." Abigail smiled ruefully. "Is it that obvious?" When he nodded, she continued, "I'm from Pennsylvania originally. After my parents died, I lived with an uncle in St. Louis, but that arrangement became untenable." She didn't elaborate on the increasingly inappropriate attentions her uncle had begun to pay her. "I decided to head west. I'd heard stories about California, and I can sing, so I thought perhaps I could make my way to San Francisco and find work in the theaters there. But you ended up here instead." "I ran out of money," she admitted. "The stage-coach fare from Marysville to San Francisco was more than I expected, and when I heard the Golden Nugget was looking for a singer, I thought I'd stay a few months, save up, then continue on." "And then you fell ill," Nathan surmised. Abigail nodded. "A fever. I was bedridden for a week." "Mr. Hargrove doesn't tolerate missed work, regardless of the reason." She looked up at Nathan curiously. "And what brings you to Downeyville, Mr. Wright? You mentioned you're from Colorado." "I was," he confirmed. "I had a small ranch outside Denver. Sold it after my father passed last spring." "I'm sorry for your loss," Abigail said sincerely. Nathan inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Thank you. As for why I'm here, I'm headed to Sacramento on business, but the weather forced me to seek shelter. I hadn't planned on stopping in Downeyville at all." Before Abigail could inquire further, Mrs. Sullivan returned. "The bath is ready, dear. Let's get you warmed up properly before you catch your death." With Mrs. Sullivan's help, Abigail made her way to the small room where a copper tub had been filled with steaming water. The older woman helped her undress, clucking sympathetically at the sight of Abigail's too thin frame. "Land sakes, child, you're naught but skin and bones. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" "It's been a while," Abigail admitted. "Well, we'll remedy that straight away. Once you're warm and rested, I'll fix you something hearty." The bath was heavenly, the hot water soothing away the bone-deep chill and easing her aching muscles. Mrs. Sullivan had added some sort of herbal mixture that smelled of lavender and mint, and Abigail felt her tension melting away as she soaked. By the time she emerged, Dressed in a borrowed nightgown and robe that had belonged to Mrs. Sullivan's daughter, Abigail felt almost human again. Her hair was still damp, but Mrs. Sullivan had insisted on braiding it for her to keep it from tangling. Nathan was still in the sitting room, now engaged in conversation with Mrs. Sullivan's boarder, a Mr. Finch, who worked as the town's telegraph operator. Both men rose when Abigail entered. "You look much improved, Miss Duncan," Nathan said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "I feel much better, thank you," she replied, aware of a slight flush rising to her cheeks under his gaze. Mrs. Sullivan ushered her to a chair near the fire. "Margaret has prepared some beef broth and bread for you. Nothing too heavy at first, but enough to put some strength back in you." The broth was rich and flavorful, and Abigail hadn't realized how hungry she was until she began to eat. She tried to maintain proper table manners, but it was difficult not to simply gulp down the food. As she ate, she became aware of Nathan watching her, though he tried to be discreet about it. There was something in his gaze that made her self-conscious, yet not unpleasantly so. He was handsome. She had to admit, tall and broad-shouldered, with those striking blue eyes and a strong jawline. His manner was gentle despite his size, and there was an intelligence in his expression that intrigued her. After she had eaten, Mrs. Sullivan insisted she go directly to bed. "Your body needs rest to recover, my dear. Tomorrow is soon enough to worry about what comes next." Abigail couldn't argue exhaustion was overtaking her now that she was warm and fed. As Mrs. Sullivan showed her to a small but comfortable bedroom on the ground floor, she glanced back at Nathan. "Good night, Mr. Wright, and thank you again." He nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Good night, Miss Duncan. Sleep well." Despite her exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily to Abigail that night. Her mind kept replaying the events of the day, the terror of being locked out, the creeping numbness of the cold, and then Nathan's unexpected rescue. Where would she go now? What would she do? Her job at the saloon was surely gone, and with it her only source of income. Eventually, physical exhaustion won out over mental anxiety, and she drifted into a deep, dreamless sleep. She awoke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she was disoriented, but then the events of the previous night came flooding back. She sat up slowly, relieved to find that most of her strength seemed to have returned. After dressing in her own clothes, which Mrs. Sullivan had kindly washed and dried by the fire overnight, Abigail made her way to the kitchen. Mrs. Sullivan was at the stove, while Margaret set the table. Nathan was already seated, a mug of coffee in his hands. He stood when she entered. "Good morning, Miss Duncan. You're looking much better today." "Good morning," she replied. "I feel much better, thank you." Mrs. Sullivan turned from the stove with a beaming smile. "There she is. Come, sit down and have some breakfast. Nothing puts color back in the cheeks like a proper meal." Abigail was surprised to find herself ravenously hungry. She ate 2 helpings of eggs and bacon, along with several slices of Mrs. Sullivan's homemade bread. Throughout the meal, she was aware of Nathan's gaze occasionally landing on her, though he was careful not to stare. As Margaret cleared the dishes, Mrs. Sullivan settled back with her coffee. "Now then, let's talk about what comes next. Mr. Wright tells me you've lost your position at the saloon." Abigail nodded reluctantly. "I expect so, yes. Mr. Hargrove made it clear I wasn't welcome back." "Good riddance to bad rubbish, I say," Mrs. Sullivan declared firmly. "That man has no Christian charity in him whatsoever. The question is, what will you do now?" "I'm not sure," Abigail admitted. "My plan was always to continue on to San Francisco eventually, but I haven't saved nearly enough for the fare yet." Mrs. Sullivan exchanged a look with Nathan that Abigail couldn't quite interpret. "Well," the older woman said, As it happens, I may have a solution. Mr. Wright here has offered to pay for your room and board here for the next 2 weeks, to give you time to recover fully and make plans." Abigail's head snapped up in surprise. "Mr. Wright? But why would you?" "It's the least I can do," Nathan said quietly. "You're in this situation partly because of illness, which isn't your fault, and 2 weeks' room and board is a small price to pay for your life." "I can't accept that," Abigail protested, though a part of her desperately wanted to. "It's too generous." "I insist," Nathan said firmly. "Consider it in advance if you prefer. Mrs. Sullivan mentioned that the church is in need of a singer for their Christmas service, and I've agreed to speak to the deacon on your behalf. If all goes well, you can repay me from your earnings, though I assure you it's not necessary." Abigail was momentarily speechless. The kindness of these virtual strangers was overwhelming after the cruelty she had experienced at Hargrove's hands. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed. "Say yes," Mrs. Sullivan encouraged. "It's a fair arrangement and it gives you time to get back on your feet." After a moment's hesitation, Abigail nodded. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Wright. I promise I'll repay you as soon as I'm able." "Excellent." Mrs. Sullivan clapped her hands together. "That's settled then. Now, Mr. Wright, didn't you mention you had business in town this morning?" Nathan rose from the table. "I did. I need to check on my horse and see about repairing that window at the saloon, as I promised." He turned to Abigail. "I'll return around midday if that's agreeable. Perhaps you might join me for a walk then if you're feeling up to it. I find fresh air is often the best medicine." Abigail was surprised by the invitation, but found herself nodding. "I'd like that, thank you." After Nathan had departed, Mrs. Sullivan busied herself showing Abigail around the house and explaining the simple rules she expected her boarders to follow. The house was modest but well-maintained, with 4 bedrooms upstairs and the one Abigail currently occupied downstairs, which Mrs. Sullivan explained had been added later when her husband's mother had come to live with them. "My Frederick, God rest him, was a good builder," Mrs. Sullivan said proudly. "He added this room when Mother Sullivan could no longer manage the stairs. It's small, but it's comfortable, isn't it?" "Very," Abigail agreed. "I can't thank you enough for taking me in, Mrs. Sullivan." The older woman patted her hand. "Think nothing of it, dear." "Now tell me, what do you make of Mr. Wright?" The question caught Abigail off guard. I hardly know him," she stammered. "He seems very kind." "Indeed he does," Mrs. Sullivan said with a knowing look. "And handsome too, wouldn't you say? Not many men would break a window to save a stranger or offer to pay for their lodging afterward." Abigail felt her cheeks warming. "I suppose he is handsome," she admitted, "but I'm sure he's just being charitable." Mrs. Sullivan smiled enigmatically. "Perhaps. Or perhaps he sees something special in you, as any man with eyes in his head would." Before Abigail could respond to this startling suggestion, Mrs. Sullivan continued briskly. "Now, I've some mending to do and you should rest before your walk. Doctor's orders, and I was a doctor's wife for 40 years, so I know what I'm talking about." Left alone in her room, Abigail found herself thinking about Nathan Wright. He was certainly unlike any man she'd met before. There was a quiet strength to him that she found appealing, and a gentleness that seemed at odds with his powerful build. But surely, Mrs. Sullivan was mistaken about his interest in her. What could a man like Nathan, who owned a ranch and clearly had means, possibly see in a penniless singer? Yet when he returned shortly after noon, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt beneath his coat, Abigail couldn't help but notice the way his eyes brightened when he saw her, or the way he seemed genuinely interested in her well-being. "Are you sure you're up for a walk?" he asked as she donned her coat and the warm woolen scarf Mrs. Sullivan had insisted she borrow. We could stay inside if you prefer. I'd like some fresh air, Abigail assured him. I feel much stronger today. The weather had improved somewhat, the snow had stopped, and while it was still bitterly cold, the sun was shining in a clear blue sky. Nathan offered his arm as they stepped outside, and Abigail took it gratefully, both for support and for the additional warmth. I spoke to Deacon Ellis about the Christmas service, Nathan told her as they walked slowly down the street. He's quite interested in having you sing. Apparently, the lady who usually performs is visiting her daughter in Sacramento and won't be back in time. That's wonderful news, Abigail said, genuinely pleased. I love singing sacred music. It reminds me of my mother. She used to sing in our church choir back home. You must miss her, Nathan said softly. Abigail nodded. Every day, but it helps to sing the songs she loved. She glanced up at him. What about your family? You mentioned your father passed recently. He did, Nathan confirmed. It was just the two of us for many years. My mother died when I was 12. Influenza took her one winter. His expression grew distant. My father never remarried, though I think he was lonely. He put everything into the ranch and into raising me. You must have been close, Abigail observed. Nathan nodded. We were. That's partly why I sold the ranch after he died. Too many memories. I thought a fresh start somewhere new might be good for me. And where will that fresh start be? Abigail asked, curious about his plans. I'm not entirely sure yet, he admitted. I have some business interests in Sacramento that need attending to, and then I thought I might head farther west, perhaps all the way to San Francisco. The mention of San Francisco reminded Abigail of her own stalled plans. It's supposed to be beautiful there, she said wistfully, with real theaters and music halls. Is that still your destination then? Nathan asked. Once you've recovered and earned enough money. I think so, she replied, though with less certainty than before. It's been my plan for so long that it's strange to consider alternatives. They had reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to snow-covered pines. The view of the mountains beyond was breathtaking, the snow-capped peaks gleaming in the winter sunlight. It's beautiful here, Nathan remarked, gazing at the scenery. Different from Colorado, but beautiful in its own way. Abigail nodded in agreement. I've grown fond of Downeyville, despite everything. The people are mostly kind, and the mountains make me feel protected somehow. They stood in comfortable silence for a few moments, taking in the view. Then Nathan turned to her, his expression serious. Miss Duncan, Abigail, if I may, there's something I'd like to discuss with you. The use of her first name surprised her, but she nodded. Of course. I've been thinking about your situation, and I have a proposition that might benefit us both. He hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. As I mentioned, I have business in Sacramento that requires my attention soon. I plan to leave in 3 days' time. I would be honored if you would consider accompanying me. Abigail blinked in surprise. Accompanying you to Sacramento? Nathan nodded. The journey is much safer with a companion, especially in winter. And Sacramento is closer to San Francisco. You could continue your journey from there, if that's still your wish. He paused. I would, of course, pay for your travel expenses and ensure you have proper accommodations. Abigail was momentarily speechless. The offer was generous, almost too generous. Mr. Wright, I don't know what to say. It's a kind offer, but I wouldn't want to be a burden. You wouldn't be, he assured her quickly. In fact, having a lady companion on the journey would be advantageous. People are less suspicious of a man traveling with a woman than of a man traveling alone. He smiled slightly. And I enjoy your company, which makes the proposition entirely selfish on my part. Abigail felt a blush rising to her cheeks again. You hardly know me, she pointed out. True, Nathan acknowledged. "But what I do know I admire. You've shown remarkable courage and resilience in difficult circumstances." And he added with a smile, "Mrs. Sullivan speaks very highly of you, which carries considerable weight in my estimation." Abigail couldn't help but laugh at that. "Mrs. Sullivan is very kind. She's an excellent judge of character," Nathan countered. "Will you consider my offer at least? You don't need to decide immediately." After a moment's thought, Abigail nodded. "I'll consider it, thank you." The relief on Nathan's face was evident. "Excellent. Now, shall we continue our walk? There's a bakery around the corner that I'm told makes exceptional apple tarts." As they continued through town, Abigail found herself studying Nathan more closely. There was something about him that inspired trust, a steadiness that was comforting after the upheaval of recent days. The idea of traveling to Sacramento with him was both exciting and slightly terrifying. She had always prided herself on her independence, on making her own way in the world, yet there was no denying the practical advantages of his offer. At the bakery, Nathan insisted on buying tarts for them both, as well as a loaf of fresh bread to bring back to Mrs. Sullivan as a thank you. As they sat at a small table by the window, enjoying the warm, sweet pastries, Nathan told her more about his life in Colorado and his plans for the future. "The ranch was successful," he explained, "but my heart was never truly in ranching the way my father's was. I've always been more interested in business ventures. That's what takes me to Sacramento. I've invested in a shipping company that brings goods up from San Francisco, and I need to meet with my partners." "It sounds like an exciting opportunity," Abigail said, genuinely interested. Nathan nodded. "It is. California is growing rapidly, and there's money to be made in ensuring goods move efficiently from the coast inland." He paused, then asked, "What about you? Has singing always been your passion?" Abigail smiled. "For as long as I can remember. My mother used to say I was singing before I could talk properly. She taught me everything I know: how to read music, how to control my breathing, how to project without straining my voice." Her expression grew wistful. "She always said I could sing in grand concert halls someday. That's part of why San Francisco appeals to me so much. It's a chance to fulfill that dream." "I'd very much like to hear you sing sometime," Nathan said. "Perhaps at the Christmas service if I'm still in town." "When do you leave for Sacramento?" Abigail asked. "In 3 days," he replied. "The stage runs twice weekly, weather permitting, and I've secured passage on Thursday's coach." He hesitated, then added, "The offer to join me remains open, of course." Abigail nodded, still uncertain but increasingly tempted. "I'll let you know my decision before then." As they walked back to Mrs. Sullivan's house, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the snow. Despite the cold, Abigail felt warmer than she had in days, and it wasn't just from the physical exercise. There was something about Nathan's company that lifted her spirits. Mrs. Sullivan was delighted with the bread they brought back and insisted Nathan stay for dinner. The meal was simple but delicious: a hearty stew with the fresh bread, and apple preserves that Mrs. Sullivan had put up the previous summer. The conversation flowed easily, with Mr. Finch sharing local gossip and Mrs. Sullivan recounting tales of Downeyville's early days. Throughout the evening, Abigail found her gaze drawn repeatedly to Nathan. There was an ease about him that was appealing. He listened attentively when others spoke, offered thoughtful comments, and showed a genuine interest in everything around him. Several times, she caught him watching her with an expression that made her heart beat a little faster. After dinner, Mr. Finch retired to his room to write letters, and Mrs. Sullivan busied herself in the kitchen. Nathan helped Abigail clear the table, their hands occasionally brushing as they worked. "Would you like to sit by the fire for a while?" he asked once they'd finished. It's still early. Abigail nodded, and they settled in the comfortable chairs near the hearth. The crackling fire cast a warm glow over the room, and outside the wind had begun to pick up again, making the windows rattle slightly. "I'm glad you're not out in that tonight," Nathan said softly, following her gaze to the window. "Thanks to you," Abigail replied. She hesitated, then added, "I've been thinking about your offer to travel to Sacramento." Nathan straightened slightly, his expression attentive. "And I think I'd like to accept," she said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "If the offer still stands." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was warm enough to rival the fire. "It absolutely does. I'm delighted you'll be joining me." "There is one condition, though," Abigail added. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I want to pay my own way eventually. I'll accept your help with the journey, but once we reach Sacramento, I'd like to find work so I can repay you." Nathan looked as though he wanted to protest, but after studying her determined expression, he nodded. "I understand. Your independence is important to you." "It is," she confirmed. "It has to be. As a woman alone in the world, it's all I have." Nathan's expression softened. "I respect that. But accepting help when it's offered isn't the same as surrendering your independence. Sometimes it's just good sense." Abigail couldn't help but smile at that. "Perhaps you're right. Still, my condition stands." "Then I accept your condition," Nathan replied with mock solemnity, though his eyes were twinkling. "We leave on Thursday morning. The stage departs at 8 o'clock. As they continued to talk by the fire, Abigail felt a growing sense of excitement about the journey ahead. Sacramento was a much larger city than Downeyville, with more opportunities for a singer of her talents. And if things went well there, San Francisco was just a short journey further. But as she glanced at Nathan, who was describing a particularly beautiful part of the journey they would be taking, she realized that her excitement wasn't solely about the destination. The idea of traveling with him, of continuing to enjoy his company, was equally appealing. For the first time since arriving in Downeyville, Abigail felt genuinely hopeful about the future. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with renewed strength and perhaps with a friend by her side. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of preparation. Abigail met with Deacon Ellis and agreed to sing at the Christmas service, which would take place the Sunday after she and Nathan departed. The deacon was disappointed to learn she wouldn't be staying in town for the actual service, but he offered her a small payment to help prepare the choir before she left, which she gratefully accepted. Nathan, meanwhile, was busy with his own preparations. He purchased additional supplies for the journey and arranged for Mrs. Sullivan to send on any mail that might arrive for him after his departure. He also, much to Abigail's surprise, confronted Vernon Hargrove about her belongings and wages. "You did what?" Abigail gasped when he told her over lunch on Wednesday. Nathan looked slightly sheepish. "I may have suggested to Mr. Hargrove that withholding a lady's personal property and earned wages could be considered theft, which is a hanging offense in mining towns." "You didn't?" Abigail wasn't sure whether to be horrified or impressed. "I did," Nathan confirmed, looking rather pleased with himself. "And it worked. He gave me your remaining belongings, not much, I'm afraid, just some sheet music and a few personal items and your final week's wages." He produced a small pouch and handed it to her. "It's all there. I counted it myself." Abigail was momentarily speechless. No one had ever stood up for her that way before. "Thank you," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. Nathan waved away her thanks. "It was the right thing to do. Besides, I enjoyed watching Hargrove squirm." That evening, Mrs. Sullivan insisted on hosting a small farewell dinner for them. She invited Deacon Ellis and his wife, as well as Jenkins from the Saloon, who had been checking in on Abigail regularly since the night of her ordeal. The dinner was a warm, jovial affair. Mrs. Sullivan had outdone herself with a roast, vegetables from her root cellar, and a berry pie that she claimed was just something I threw together, though it was clearly a labor of love. After the meal, at the deacon's request, Abigail sang a hymn, her clear, pure voice filling the small house. When she finished, there was a moment of awed silence before the applause began. Abigail felt her cheeks flush with pleasure, but it was Nathan's expression that caught and held her attention. He was looking at her with such open admiration that it made her heart skip a beat. "My dear, you have a gift from God," Mrs. Ellis declared, patting Abigail's hand. "It's a shame you won't be here for the service." "Perhaps she'll return someday," Nathan suggested, his eyes still on Abigail. Downeyville would be lucky to have her back. Later, as the guests were preparing to leave, Jenkins pulled Abigail aside. "Miss Duncan, I wanted to let you know I've spoken to some friends in Sacramento. There's a hotel there, the River Palace, that often features singers in their dining room. I've taken the liberty of writing to the manager on your behalf." Abigail was touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. That's very kind of you." Jenkins shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Least I could do. Never did sit right with me the way Hargrove treated you." After the guests had departed and Mrs. Sullivan had retired for the night, Abigail and Nathan found themselves once again sitting by the fire. Tomorrow's journey loomed before them, and Abigail felt a mix of excitement and nervousness at the prospect. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" Nathan asked, seeming to sense her thoughts. "I think so," Abigail replied. "It will be strange to leave Downeyville. For all its challenges, it's the closest thing I've had to a home in quite some time." Nathan nodded in understanding. "Homes can be found in unexpected places," he said thoughtfully. "And sometimes they're not places at all, but people." The simple statement struck a chord with Abigail. Her home had never really been a physical place, it had been her parents', and when they were gone, she had felt adrift despite having a roof over her head. "That's true," she said softly. "I haven't felt at home anywhere since my parents died, but these past few days, with Mrs. Sullivan's kindness and your friendship, I've felt something close to it." Nathan's gaze was warm as it met hers. "I'm glad," he said. "And I hope you'll continue to feel that way as we journey together." There was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't just talking about their trip to Sacramento, but Abigail was too cautious to read too much into it. Instead, she focused on the practical aspects of tomorrow's journey. "How long will it take us to reach Sacramento?" she asked. 2 days, weather permitting," Nathan replied. "We'll stop overnight in Nevada City. The roads can be treacherous this time of year, but the stage drivers know their business." They discussed the details of the journey for a while longer, and then, as the fire began to die down, they reluctantly parted for the night. Tomorrow would be an early start. Abigail lay awake for some time, her mind too active for sleep. So much had changed in just a few days. She had gone from the brink of death to the threshold of a new adventure, all because Nathan Wright had happened to be passing by at exactly the right moment. Coincidence, or something more? Abigail wasn't sure, but as she finally drifted off to sleep, she found herself hoping that whatever had brought Nathan into her life would keep him there for a while longer. The stage departed Downeyville precisely at 8 o'clock the next morning. Mrs. Sullivan saw them off with teary hugs and a basket of food for the journey. The coach was crowded besides Abigail and Nathan. There were 3 other passengers: a middle-aged businessman from San Francisco, a young mining engineer returning to Sacramento after surveying claims in the area, and an elderly lady traveling to Nevada City to visit her grandchildren. Nathan had secured them seats next to each other, and as the coach lurched into motion, Abigail found herself pressed against his side. She was grateful for his solid presence as they navigated the winding mountain roads. The journey was uncomfortable at times, with the coach swaying and bouncing over rough patches, but Nathan's steady conversation and occasional humorous observations kept her spirits high. By mid-afternoon, they had descended enough that the snow began to thin, and by early evening, when they reached Nevada City, the ground was merely frosted rather than deeply blanketed. The town was larger than Downeyville, with more substantial buildings and a busier main street. Nathan had arranged rooms for them at the National Exchange Hotel, a 3-story brick building that was considerably grander than anything in Downeyville. After checking in, they agreed to meet for dinner in an hour, giving them both time to refresh themselves after the journey. Abigail's room was small but elegantly appointed, with a real feather bed and flowered wallpaper. She washed away the dust of travel as best she could with the basin provided, then changed into her one good dress, a deep blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. She had just finished pinning up her hair when there was a gentle knock at the door. Nathan stood in the hallway, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt and waistcoat beneath his coat. His eyes widened slightly when he saw her. "Miss Duncan, you look lovely." Abigail felt herself blushing at the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Wright. Shall we go down?" The hotel's dining room was busy, filled with travelers and local businessmen. They were shown to a small table near a window, and Abigail was impressed by the menu, which offered far more variety than she was accustomed to in Downeyville. "Order whatever you like," Nathan encouraged her. "The journey works up an appetite." Over dinner, they discussed their observations of Nevada City and their expectations for Sacramento. The mining engineer they had traveled with had mentioned that Sacramento was booming, with new businesses opening weekly and opportunities abounding for those with skills or capital to invest. "I've never been to a city that size," Abigail admitted. "St. Louis was the largest place I've lived, and I understand Sacramento has grown considerably in recent years." Nathan nodded. "It has. The gold rush transformed it from a small settlement to a substantial city in just a few years. It can be overwhelming at first, but it's also exciting, full of energy and possibility." "And what will you do there, besides meet with your business partners?" Abigail asked, curious about his plans. "I have several interests to attend to," Nathan replied. "The shipping company is my primary concern, but I'm also considering investing in a lumber mill. California's growth means a constant demand for building materials." He paused, then added, "And I hope to help you get established, of course." Abigail was touched by his continued thoughtfulness. "You've already done so much for me." "I've hardly begun," Nathan said with a smile that made her heart flutter. "Jenkins's contact at the River Palace is a good start, but there are other venues in Sacramento that might suit your talents as well." After dinner, they took a short walk through the town. The air was crisp but not bitterly cold, and the streets were well lit with gas lamps. Nevada City had a more established feel than Downeyville, with brick buildings and proper sidewalks along the main street. As they walked, Nathan offered Abigail his arm, and she took it without hesitation. There was a comfortable familiarity between them now, born of shared experiences and growing trust. When they returned to the hotel, Nathan escorted her to her door. "We leave at 7 tomorrow morning," he reminded her. "The second day of the journey is longer than the first, but the roads improve as we get closer to Sacramento." Abigail nodded. "I'll be ready." There was a moment of awkward silence, as if neither quite knew how to say goodnight. Finally, Nathan took her hand and raised it to his lips in a gesture that was both courtly and surprisingly intimate. "Sleep well, Abigail," he said softly, using her first name again. The sound of it in his deep voice sent a pleasant shiver through her. "Good night, Nathan," she replied, testing the feel of his name on her own lips. It felt right, somehow, as she prepared for bed. Abigail found herself reflecting on how quickly her circumstances had changed. Just a few days ago, she had been facing the very real possibility of freezing to death in the Downeyville winter. Now she was staying in a fine hotel, traveling to Sacramento with a man who seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare, and perhaps even on the verge of realizing her dream of becoming a professional singer. It was almost too much good fortune to believe, and part of her feared it might vanish as quickly as it had appeared. But another part, a growing part, dared to hope that this might be the beginning of something lasting. The next morning dawned clear and crisp. The stage was less crowded for the journey to Sacramento, just Abigail, Nathan, and the businessman from San Francisco. This allowed them more comfort, though the roads were still rough in places, especially as they descended further into the foothills. As promised, the scenery changed dramatically throughout the day. The pine forests gave way to rolling hills dotted with oak trees, and by late afternoon they were traveling through the Sacramento Valley, with its expansive farmlands and occasional settlements. The air grew noticeably warmer as they descended, and Abigail was able to remove her heavy coat for the first time in months. Nathan pointed out landmarks along the way, sharing what he knew about the region's history and development. His knowledge impressed Abigail, as did his evident enthusiasm for the country's future. "California is still finding its identity," he explained. "It's a mixture of cultures and traditions: Mexican, American, Chinese, European. That creates challenges, certainly, but also opportunities for those willing to embrace new ideas." "Is that what draws you here?" Abigail asked. "The opportunity for new beginnings?" Nathan considered the question thoughtfully. "Partly," he admitted. "After my father died, Colorado held too many memories. But it's more than that. There's an energy here, a sense of possibility that I find compelling." As the sun began to set, the lights of Sacramento appeared on the horizon. Abigail felt a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. This was to be her new home, at least temporarily. What would it hold for her? The stage rolled into the city as darkness fell, the streets illuminated by gas lamps and the windows of shops and homes. Abigail was immediately struck by the size and bustle of the place even at this hour. The streets were active with people and horse-drawn vehicles of all descriptions. They were deposited at the stage office on K Street, and Nathan immediately hired a carriage to take them to their hotel. He had reserved rooms at the Orleans Hotel, which he assured Abigail was one of the finest in the city. The Orleans was indeed impressive, a large, stately building with a grand entrance hall and uniformed staff. Abigail felt somewhat out of place in her travel-worn clothes, but Nathan's confident manner and the respect he was shown by the hotel staff soon put her at ease. "I've taken the liberty of reserving a suite for you," Nathan told her as they checked in. "I thought you might appreciate the extra space after our journey." Abigail was overwhelmed by his generosity. "Nathan, that's too much," he shook his head, cutting off her protest. "Please allow me this. It's important to me that you're comfortable here." The suite was beyond anything Abigail had experienced before: a sitting room with elegant furniture, a separate bedroom with a large four-poster bed, and a private bathroom with hot and cold running water. The windows overlooked the city, with its grid of streets and mix of buildings old and new. "This is extraordinary," Abigail said, turning to Nathan with wide eyes. He smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. "I'm glad you like it. Now you must be tired after our journey. Would you prefer to dine in your room this evening, or would you care to join me in the hotel restaurant?" Despite her fatigue, Abigail found she wasn't ready to part from Nathan's company just yet. "I'd be happy to join you for dinner if you don't mind waiting while I freshen up a bit." "Of course," Nathan replied. "Shall we meet in the lobby in, say, half an hour?" The hotel restaurant was elegant, with white tablecloths, crystal glasses, and attentive waiters. Abigail felt somewhat underdressed, but tried not to let it dampen her enjoyment of the evening. The food was excellent, far more sophisticated than what was available in Downeyville, and the wine Nathan selected complemented it perfectly. As they dined, Nathan outlined his plans for the next few days. "I have meetings tomorrow and the day after, but I'm free in the evenings. And I've arranged an introduction for you at the River Palace Hotel for tomorrow afternoon, if that suits you." Abigail was touched by his thoughtfulness. "You've thought of everything." Nathan's expression grew serious. "I want to help you succeed, Abigail. Your talent deserves to be heard." There was something in his voice that suggested his interest went beyond mere charity or friendship, and Abigail felt her pulse quicken. But before she could respond, they were interrupted by the waiter bringing dessert. By the time they finished their meal, Abigail was struggling to stifle her yawns. The long journey and the excitement of arrival had caught up with her. "I think it's time I escort you back to your room," Nathan said with a smile. "Tomorrow will be a busy day." At her door, he took her hand once again, but this time, instead of kissing it, he simply held it between both of his. "Abigail, I want you to know how glad I am that you agreed to come to Sacramento. These past few days have been—" He paused, seemingly searching for the right word. "Special," he finally said. "At least they have been for me." Abigail felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with wine or dinner. "For me as well," she admitted softly. Nathan's smile deepened. "Good night, then. Sleep well, and I'll see you in the morning." As Abigail prepared for bed in her luxurious surroundings, she found herself replaying every moment of the day, every conversation, every glance exchanged with Nathan. There was no denying it any longer. She was developing feelings for him that went far beyond gratitude or friendship. The question was, did he feel the same? And even if he did, what could come of it? Nathan was clearly a man of means and education, while she was a singer of humble background with little to her name. Such differences might not matter in the romanticized world of novels, but in reality, they often proved insurmountable. Yet, as she drifted off to sleep, Abigail couldn't help but hold onto a small flicker of hope. Nathan had already defied conventional expectations in so many ways, perhaps in this too. He would prove exceptional. The next morning, Abigail awoke to sunshine streaming through her window and the sounds of a city already bustling with activity. After ordering a light breakfast from room service, another luxury she'd never experienced, before she spent some time exploring her suite more thoroughly and planning her day. Nathan had mentioned that her audition at the River Palace was scheduled for 3 o'clock, which gave her the morning to prepare. She carefully laid out her blue dress again, it was the best she had, and spent time practicing her vocal exercises. Her voice was in good form, thankfully, having fully recovered from her illness. Around noon, there was a knock at her door. When she opened it, she found a hotel staff member holding a large box. "Delivery for Miss Duncan," the young man said. Puzzled, Abigail accepted the box and carried it to the sitting room. Inside, she found a beautiful sage green dress of fine wool with a matching jacket and bonnet. There was also a pair of leather boots and gloves. A note in Nathan's handwriting lay on top, for your audition today. I hope they fit." Abigail was speechless. The garments were of excellent quality, practical yet fashionable, exactly what a respectable lady might wear to a professional engagement. When she tried them on, she found they fit nearly perfectly, though the dress was perhaps a touch long. She wondered how Nathan had managed to guess her size so accurately. Just as she was admiring her reflection in the mirror, there was another knock at the door. This time it was Nathan himself, looking handsome in a well-cut suit. His eyes widened appreciatively when he saw her. "The color suits you perfectly," he said. "I hoped it would." "Nathan, this is too much," Abigail protested, though she couldn't help smoothing her hands over the fine fabric. "The hotel, the meals, and now this. Consider it an investment in your future success," Nathan replied. "A talented performer needs to look the part." His expression grew more serious. "If it truly makes you uncomfortable, think of it as a loan. You can repay me once you're established." Abigail knew he was offering her a way to accept his gift without wounding her pride. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll treasure it," Nathan smiled. "Good. Now I've arranged for a carriage to take you to the River Palace at 2:30. I have a meeting, or I would escort you myself." "I'll be fine," Abigail assured him. "You've already done more than enough." Nathan reached out and briefly touched her hand. "We'll meet for dinner tonight and you can tell me all about your triumph." His confidence in her was both touching and fortifying. As she watched him leave for his meeting, Abigail felt a surge of determination. She would not disappoint him. The River Palace Hotel was almost as grand as the Orleans, though in a different way less formal elegance and more ostentatious display. Gold leaf adorned the columns in the lobby, and plush red carpets covered the floors. Abigail was shown to a large dining room where a man in an expensive suit was instructing staff on the arrangement of tables. "Mr. Thornton," she inquired. "I'm Abigail Duncan. I believe Mr. Jenkins from Downeyville contacted you about an audition." The man turned, assessing her with a quick professional glance. "Ah, yes, Miss Duncan. Jenkins spoke highly of your talents." He gestured to a small stage at one end of the room where a piano stood. "Whenever you're ready." Abigail handed the pianist the sheet music. She had brought a selection of popular ballads and a few light opera pieces, and took her position on the stage. She was nervous, but not overwhelmingly so. Singing was the one thing in life she had always been certain of. The first notes from the piano rang out, and Abigail began to sing. She had chosen to start with "Beautiful Dreamer," a Stephen Foster piece that showcased both the clarity of her upper register and the warmth of her middle range. As she sang, she noticed the staff pausing in their work to listen, and Mr. Thornton's expression of polite interest gradually transformed into genuine appreciation. After she had performed 3 songs, Thornton raised a hand to stop her. "That will be sufficient, Miss Duncan. I believe we can find a place for you here." Relief and joy flooded through Abigail. "Thank you, Mr. Thornton. We offer entertainment during dinner hours from 6 until 9, Tuesday through Saturday," Thornton explained. "The pay is $2 per night plus meals. You would be expected to perform a variety of popular songs, nothing too operatic or religious. Our clientele prefers lighter fare." $2 per night was more than she had made in a week at the Golden Nugget. "That sounds perfect," Abigail agreed eagerly. "Can you start tomorrow evening?" Thornton asked. "Our current singer is leaving at the end of the week, but I'd like to have you begin immediately if possible." "Yes, of course," Abigail replied, hardly able to believe her good fortune. They discussed the details further: the types of songs expected, the appropriate attire, the schedule for the following week. By the time Abigail left the River Palace, her head was spinning with excitement. She had secured a position at one of Sacramento's finest establishments on her very first day in the city. The carriage Nathan had arranged was waiting to take her back to the Orleans. As they drove through the busy streets, Abigail took in the sights of her new home, the mix of grand public buildings and modest wooden structures, the diverse faces of people from all corners of the world, the general air of industry and purpose that pervaded the city. Back at the hotel, she found a note from Nathan asking her to meet him for dinner at 7 in the hotel restaurant. This gave her time to rest and prepare for the evening. As she soaked in a hot bath, another luxury, she was still getting used to. Abigail reflected on the remarkable turn her life had taken. Just a week ago, she had been facing death in the bitter cold of a Downeyville winter. Now she was staying in a luxury hotel, had secured a well-paying position doing what she loved, and was about to dine with a man who treated her with a respect and consideration she had never experienced before. It seemed almost too good to be true, and a small part of her feared that it might all disappear as suddenly as it had appeared. But a larger part, the part that had always believed in her own abilities and in the possibility of a better future, embraced these changes with cautious optimism. When she met Nathan in the restaurant that evening, he immediately noticed her radiant expression. "I take it the audition went well?" he asked as he pulled out her chair. "Better than well," Abigail replied, unable to contain her excitement. "Mr. Thornton offered me a position on the spot. I begin tomorrow evening." Nathan's face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That's wonderful news. I knew they would recognize your talent. This calls for a celebration." He signaled to the waiter. "A bottle of champagne, please." When the champagne arrived, Nathan raised his glass in a toast. "To new beginnings, and to the start of what I'm certain will be a brilliant career." Abigail clinked her glass against his, touched by his enthusiasm for her success. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said softly. "Not just the introduction or the dress, but everything. You saved my life, Nathan. I don't know if I've properly thanked you for that." Nathan's expression grew serious. "You don't need to thank me, Abigail. Finding you that night, being able to help you, it's given my life a purpose it was lacking." He hesitated, then added, "Perhaps that sounds strange, given that we've known each other such a short time." "No," Abigail replied, holding his gaze. "It doesn't sound strange at all. I feel the same way." A current of understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement that whatever was developing between them was mutual and significant. For a moment, neither spoke, content to simply exist in that shared awareness. Finally, Nathan cleared his throat. "Tell me more about the position at the River Palace. When do you start?" Over dinner, Abigail shared the details of her new job, and Nathan told her about his business meetings. His shipping venture was going well, it seemed, and his partners were eager to expand their operations. "Sacramento is growing so rapidly that there's more demand than we can meet," Nathan explained. "Goods from San Francisco, lumber from the north, manufactured items from the east, it all needs to be transported efficiently." "It sounds like a sound investment," Abigail observed. Nathan nodded. "I believe it is, and it's work I find satisfying, connecting people with what they need, helping build this new society." He looked at her curiously. "What about you? Is performing at the River Palace a stepping stone to something else, or could you see yourself settling into such a role?" Abigail considered the question. "I've always dreamed of singing in a real theater with an orchestra behind me. The River Palace is certainly a step in that direction." She paused, then admitted, "But I find I'm less fixated on San Francisco than I was before. Sacramento has opportunities I hadn't considered." "And other attractions?" Nathan asked, his tone light but his eyes intent. Abigail felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "Yes," she replied simply. Other attractions. After dinner, they took a walk along the city streets. The night was mild compared to Downeyville, with just a hint of chill in the air. Shops were closed, but many restaurants and saloons were still open, their lights casting a warm glow onto the wooden sidewalks. "Sacramento feels so alive," Abigail commented as they walked. "So full of possibility." Nathan nodded in agreement. "It's a city still finding itself, still becoming what it will be. That's what I find so appealing about it." As they turned back toward the Orleans, Nathan's hand found Abigail's, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt both protective and intimate. She didn't pull away, instead welcoming the warmth of his touch. At her door, Nathan released her hand reluctantly. "I have meetings most of tomorrow," he said, "but I'd like to attend your first performance at the River Palace if you wouldn't mind." "I'd like that very much," Abigail replied. Nathan smiled, then leaned in slowly, giving her ample time to step back if she wished. When she didn't, he placed a gentle kiss on her cheek, his lips lingering just long enough to send a pleasant shiver down her spine. "Good night, Abigail," he murmured. "Sweet dreams." "Good night, Nathan," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Inside her suite, Abigail touched her cheek where he had kissed her, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. Was this wise? They had known each other barely a week. Yet in that short time, Nathan had shown her more kindness, more respect, and more genuine care than any man she had ever known. As she prepared for bed, Abigail found herself humming softly a love song she had learned years ago, but had never sung with any real understanding of the emotions behind it. Tonight, for the first time, the lyrics resonated with her own feelings, and she realized that, against all odds and expectations, she was falling in love with Nathan Wright. The question that remained as she drifted off to sleep was what to do about it. The next day passed in a blur of preparation. Abigail spent the morning reviewing the sheet music Mr. Thornton had provided, practicing the pieces she was less familiar with. In the afternoon, she visited the River Palace for a brief rehearsal with the pianist, who turned out to be a skilled accompanist named Mr. Chen, an immigrant from China who had studied music in San Francisco. "You have beautiful voice," Mr. Chen told her after they had run through the program. "Very pure tone, good control. We make good music together, I think." Abigail was touched by his earnestness. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I look forward to working with you." When she returned to the Orleans to prepare for her first performance, Abigail found a small package waiting for her, a jewelry box containing a simple but elegant pearl pendant on a silver chain. The note with it read, "For luck tonight, I'll be there," and the gesture brought tears to her eyes. Nathan's thoughtfulness continued to surprise and move her. She fastened the pendant around her neck, where it nestled perfectly at her throat, complementing the neckline of her green dress. As she made her final preparations, Abigail felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This wasn't like singing in the Golden Nugget, where most of the audience was too drunk to pay close attention. The River Palace catered to Sacramento's elite businessmen, politicians, wealthy travelers. They would be a more discerning audience, but also potentially more appreciative of genuine talent. When she arrived at the hotel, Mr. Thornton showed her to a small room behind the dining area where she could wait until it was time to perform. The dining room itself was already filling with well-dressed patrons, the hum of conversation mingling with the clink of silverware and glasses. At precisely 6 o'clock, Mr. Thornton escorted her to the small stage. The pianist began a gentle introduction, and then it was time. Abigail took a deep breath, stepped forward, and began to sing. From the first note, she knew it was going to be a good night. Her voice was clear and strong, the acoustics of the room were excellent, and the audience, while continuing their meals, was attentive and appreciative. Between songs, there was polite applause, and occasionally someone would request a particular piece. About halfway through her first set, Abigail spotted Nathan entering the dining room. He was directed to a table near the stage, and the smile he gave her was full of encouragement and pride. His presence steadied her, and she found herself singing directly to him at times, especially during the more romantic ballads. The 3 hours passed quickly. By the final song, Abigail felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. This was what she had dreamed of, performing for an audience that truly appreciated music, in surroundings that respected her art. After her final bow, there was a round of enthusiastic applause. Mr. Thornton approached as she left the stage, clearly pleased. "Excellent, Miss Duncan. Truly excellent. I've already had several compliments from our guests." "Thank you," Abigail replied, glowing with satisfaction. "Mr. Chen is a wonderful accompanist. Indeed he is. We're fortunate to have him." Thornton handed her an envelope. "Your payment for this evening. We'll expect you back tomorrow at the same time." As Thornton left, Nathan approached, his expression warm with admiration. "You were magnificent," he said. "I knew you were talented from what Jenkins had said, but hearing you perform, it was beyond what I imagined." Abigail felt herself blushing at his praise. "Thank you, and thank you for the pendant. It's beautiful." "It suits you," Nathan replied. "Simple, elegant, with a quiet glow." His eyes held hers for a moment, and Abigail felt that familiar flutter in her chest. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "I thought we might celebrate your successful debut." They found a small restaurant not far from the River Palace, an Italian establishment with red checkered tablecloths and bottles of Chianti hanging from the ceiling. The owner, a jovial man named Giuseppe, greeted Nathan like an old friend. "Mr. Wright, good to see you again," Giuseppe exclaimed, pumping Nathan's hand enthusiastically. "And who is this lovely lady, Giuseppe?" "This is Miss Abigail Duncan," Nathan introduced her. "She's just given her first performance at the River Palace. A singer, magnificent." Giuseppe kissed Abigail's hand with theatrical flair. "You must have the best table in the house. Come, come." The best table turned out to be in a cozy corner with a good view of the small dining room. Giuseppe insisted on bringing them his special pasta dish and a bottle of wine on the house to celebrate Abigail's debut. "You seem to know everyone in Sacramento," Abigail observed once they were settled. Nathan smiled. "Hardly everyone. But I've been coming here regularly for the past year, so I've made a few acquaintances. Giuseppe is a good man, came here during the gold rush, realized he could make more money feeding miners than being one." The food was delicious, unlike anything Abigail had tasted before. The pasta was served with a rich tomato sauce, tender meatballs, and a generous sprinkle of cheese. The wine complemented it perfectly. "This is wonderful," Abigail said, savoring each bite. "I've never had Italian food before." "Sacramento has a wealth of cuisines," Nathan told her. "Chinese, Mexican, French, Italian. The gold rush brought people from all over the world, and they brought their food traditions with them." As they ate, they discussed Abigail's performance and her impressions of the River Palace. Nathan listened attentively, offering observations and encouragement that showed he had been paying close attention to her singing. "You have a gift, Abigail," he said seriously. "A truly special voice. I believe you could go far with it if that's what you want." "It's what I've always wanted," Abigail replied, "to make a living with my music, to touch people's hearts with song." She paused, then added softly, "Though lately I've begun to want other things as well." Nathan's gaze intensified. "Such as?" Abigail hesitated, gathering her courage. "Connections, roots. The kind of home I haven't had since my parents died. Are you finding those things here in Sacramento? Nathan asked, his voice gentle. I'm beginning to, Abigail admitted, more quickly than I would have thought possible. They looked at each other in silence for a moment, the unspoken understanding between them growing stronger. Then, Giuseppe appeared with dessert, a creamy confection he called tiramisu, breaking the moment but not diminishing its significance. After dinner, they walked back to the Orleans, the night air cool but pleasant. Nathan's hand found hers again, and this time their fingers intertwined with a familiarity that felt both new and somehow inevitable. At her door, Abigail turned to face him. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "Having you there meant a great deal to me." "I wouldn't have missed it," Nathan replied. He reached up to touch the pearl pendant at her throat. "This looks beautiful on you." Abigail caught his hand in hers, holding it against her collarbone. "Everything you've given me is beautiful," she said softly, "but the most precious gift has been your belief in me." Something in Nathan's expression shifted, a decision made or a barrier overcome. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was gentle yet unmistakably purposeful. Abigail had been kissed before, awkward, fumbling kisses from boys in Pennsylvania, and once a more insistent kiss from a drummer passing through St. Louis. But this was different. Nathan's kiss was respectful yet passionate, controlled yet full of promise. Without conscious thought, she found herself responding, her free hand coming up to rest on his shoulder. When they finally parted, both were slightly breathless. Nathan's eyes searched her face, as if looking for signs of regret or uncertainty. Finding none, he smiled a smile of such genuine happiness that Abigail felt her heart might burst with answering joy. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "You need your rest." Abigail nodded, though part of her wished he would stay. "Will I see you tomorrow?" "Count on it," Nathan replied. "I have meetings in the morning, but I'm free in the afternoon. Perhaps we could explore the city together before your performance." "I'd like that," Abigail said. With one more brief kiss, Nathan bid her good night. Abigail entered her suite, closing the door behind her with a sense of stepping not just into her room but into a new chapter of her life. As she prepared for bed, Abigail found herself thinking about the path that had led her here. The hardships, the losses, the moments of despair all seemed now to be necessary steps on a journey that had brought her to this place, to this moment, to Nathan. Even being locked out in the deadly cold of Downeyville had been, in its terrible way, a gift. For without that, she might never have met the man who was rapidly becoming the center of her world. The next day, Nathan took Abigail on a tour of Sacramento. They visited the state capitol building, a grand structure still under construction, the Embarcadero, where ships from San Francisco unloaded their cargoes, and several of the city's finer shops, where Nathan insisted on buying Abigail additional items for her wardrobe, despite her protests. "You're a professional performer now," he argued good-naturedly. "You need to dress the part." Abigail eventually relented, though she insisted on keeping the purchases practical: a warm coat for the winter months, a pair of sturdy boots, and one more dress for performances at the River Palace. As they walked through the city, Abigail was aware of how naturally they had fallen into step with each other, how easily conversation flowed between them. They discussed everything from music to politics, from their childhoods to their dreams for the future. With each passing hour, Abigail felt the connection between them deepening, becoming something solid and real that she could trust. That evening's performance at the River Palace went even better than the first. Abigail felt more confident, more at ease with the setting and the audience. Nathan watched from the same table, his presence a constant source of encouragement. Afterward, they dined at the hotel restaurant, where several patrons from the dining room approached to compliment Abigail on her singing. One gentleman, a Mr. Lawson who introduced himself as the director of the Sacramento Musical Society, expressed interest in having her perform at their next concert. "It's a charitable event," Mr. Lawson explained, "raising funds for the orphanage. We showcase local musical talent, and a voice like yours would be a wonderful addition to the program." "I'd be honored," Abigail replied, genuinely touched by the invitation. After Mr. Lawson departed, Nathan squeezed her hand. "You see, your reputation is already growing. Soon you'll be the toast of Sacramento's musical scene." Abigail laughed. "I think that's a bit premature, but it is gratifying to have my singing appreciated." As they walked back to the Orleans, arm in arm under a sky filled with stars, Nathan seemed deep in thought. When they reached the hotel, instead of heading directly to their rooms, he suggested they sit for a while in the small garden courtyard. The night was mild, and the courtyard was deserted at this late hour. They sat on a stone bench beneath a trellis covered with climbing roses, now dormant for the winter but still fragrant. "Abigail," Nathan began, his voice serious, "there's something I need to tell you." A flutter of anxiety passed through her. Was he leaving? Had he misled her about his feelings? "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Nathan took her hands in his. "I need to go to San Francisco. There are matters related to the shipping company that require my attention there." Relief flooded through Abigail. "Oh, when will you leave?" "The day after tomorrow," he replied, "and I expect to be gone for about a week." Abigail nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. A week seemed a long time to be apart, especially when their relationship was so new. "I'll miss you," she said simply. Nathan's expression softened. "I'll miss you too, more than I can say." He hesitated, then continued, "I'd thought to ask if you might accompany me, but I realize you've just begun your position at the River Palace, and it wouldn't be fair to ask you to jeopardize that." "No, it wouldn't be wise," Abigail agreed, though part of her wished she could accept such an invitation. "Mr. Thornton has been very generous in giving me this opportunity. I should honor my commitment." Nathan nodded, a hint of pride in his eyes. "You're right, of course. Your sense of responsibility is one of the things I admire about you." "One of the things." The phrase hung between them, suggesting there were many others. Abigail found herself wondering what else he admired, what other qualities he had observed in their short time together. "But there's something else I wanted to discuss," Nathan continued, his voice taking on a new gravity. "Something that's been on my mind for several days now." Abigail waited, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. "I know we've known each other only a short time," Nathan said carefully. "Under normal circumstances, I would wait, give us both more time to be certain, but our circumstances have been far from normal from the beginning." He smiled slightly. "When I broke that window and found you nearly frozen, something changed for me. I can't explain it rationally, but I felt as if I'd found something I didn't even know I was looking for." Abigail's breath caught in her throat. "I felt it too," she whispered. Nathan's grip on her hands tightened slightly. "In this past week, I've come to care for you deeply, Abigail, more deeply than I thought possible in such a short time. You're remarkable, talented, brave, kind, with a strength that humbles me." Tears pricked at Abigail's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her this way, with such sincere admiration and affection. "I don't want to rush you," Nathan continued. "I know you're just beginning to establish yourself here, to build the career you've dreamed of. But I wanted you to know, before I leave for San Francisco, that my feelings for you are serious, that I see a future where we might." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders and continued with renewed determination. "Where we might build a life together." The words hung in the air between them, a declaration that wasn't quite a proposal but was far more than a casual expression of interest. Abigail felt dizzy with the implications, with the sheer, unexpected joy of it. "Nathan," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I feel the same way. What's happened between us, it's like nothing I've ever experienced. I care for you more than I can express." Relief and happiness flooded Nathan's features. "Then I'll go to San Francisco with a light heart, knowing that what I feel is reciprocated. And when I return, perhaps we can discuss our future more concretely." "I'd like that very much," Abigail replied. Nathan cupped her face gently in his hands and kissed her a kiss filled with promise and hope, with the certainty of feelings that, while new, were nonetheless profound. When they finally parted, both were smiling, illuminated by starlight and by the knowledge that what had begun in the bitter cold of Downeyville was blossoming into something beautiful and lasting in the milder climate of Sacramento. "I should escort you to your room," Nathan said reluctantly. "It's getting late." As they walked through the quiet hotel, Abigail felt as if she were floating, her heart so full it might overflow at any moment. At her door, Nathan kissed her once more, a lingering goodbye that promised many more such moments to come. "Sweet dreams, Abigail," he murmured. "And you," she replied, her voice soft with emotion. "Until tomorrow." The next day, their last before Nathan's departure, they spent every possible moment together. In the morning, they visited the riverfront again, watching the steamboats come and go. In the afternoon, Nathan took Abigail to meet his business partners, who welcomed her warmly and expressed their approval of Nathan's new relationship in ways both subtle and overt. "Wright's been a different man this past week," Mr. Calloway, the senior partner, confided to Abigail when Nathan stepped away briefly. "Happier than I've seen him since I met him. I think you must be good for him, Miss Duncan." The comment warmed Abigail's heart. It was one thing to believe that Nathan cared for her. It was another to have that care confirmed by those who knew him well. That evening, after Abigail's performance at the River Palace, they dined at a small French restaurant that Nathan particularly favored. The atmosphere was intimate, with candlelight casting a warm glow over their table. They lingered over each course, reluctant to let the evening end. "I've arranged for letters to be forwarded to me in San Francisco," Nathan told her as they sipped coffee after their meal. "So you can write to me while I'm away." "I will," Abigail promised, "every day." "And I'll write to you," Nathan replied, "though it may be more practical to send one longer letter than daily notes given the postal schedule." Abigail smiled at his practicality. "One long letter would be perfectly acceptable as long as it contains all your news." Nathan reached across the table to take her hand. "It will, and I'll be thinking of you constantly, even when I can't write." The week of Nathan's absence proved both longer and shorter than Abigail had anticipated. Longer because she missed him terribly, his absence leaving a void in her days that nothing else could fill. Shorter because she was busy with her performances at the River Palace, with preparing for the musical society concert, and with settling into her new life in Sacramento. Mr. Thornton, impressed by the positive response to her singing, offered her an additional night of performance each week, with a corresponding increase in pay. Abigail accepted gratefully, using the extra income to begin repaying Nathan for his generosity. She insisted on paying for her own room at the Orleans, though she downgraded from the suite to a standard room to make it more affordable. She wrote to Nathan daily, as promised, sharing the details of her performances, the compliments she received, the progress of her preparations for the concert. She also wrote of her feelings for him tentatively at first, then with increasing openness as the days passed. Nathan's letters, when they arrived, were equally detailed and heartfelt. He wrote of his business dealings in San Francisco, of the city's energy and rapid growth, of the people he met, and the negotiations he conducted. But mostly, he wrote of his feelings for her, his anticipation of their reunion, his growing certainty that what they had found together was rare and precious. "Each day away from you confirms what I already knew," he wrote in one letter. "That my life is immeasurably better with you in it, and that whatever the future holds, I want to face it with you by my side." Abigail read and reread his letters until the paper grew soft from handling. Each word strengthened her conviction that what they shared was real and lasting, not merely a product of extraordinary circumstances or momentary emotion. By the time Nathan was due to return, Abigail had established a comfortable routine in Sacramento. She performed at the River Palace 4 nights a week, rehearsed with the musical society twice weekly, and spent her free time exploring the city and making new acquaintances. She had moved to a boarding house run by a widow named Mrs. Pemberton, who catered specifically to respectable single women. It wasn't as luxurious as the Orleans, but it was clean, comfortable, and significantly less expensive. More importantly, it gave Abigail a sense of independence, of making her own way on her own terms. Nathan's stage was scheduled to arrive at noon on a Tuesday. Abigail, too excited to focus on anything else, spent the morning pacing her room and repeatedly checking the clock. At 11:30, unable to wait any longer, she made her way to the stage office on K Street. The office was crowded with people awaiting arrivals or departing on outbound stages. Abigail found a spot near the window where she could watch for the San Francisco stage. As the minutes ticked by, her anticipation grew, a fluttering nervousness in her stomach that was both pleasant and maddening. At 10 minutes past 12, the stage appeared, pulled by 6 dusty horses and covered in the grime of the road. Abigail's heart leapt. She pressed closer to the window, scanning the faces of the passengers as they descended. And then he was there, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat pulled low against the midday sun. Nathan. For a moment, Abigail simply drank in the sight of him, noting with relief that he appeared well, if somewhat tired from the journey. Then he looked up and saw her through the window. His face transformed, weariness giving way to joy as their eyes met. He said something to the driver who was unloading luggage, then strode quickly toward the office door. Abigail moved to meet him, weaving through the crowd with single-minded purpose. They met in the center of the room, heedless of the people milling around them. "Abigail," Nathan said, his voice warm with emotion. "Welcome back," she replied, suddenly shy despite the intensity of her feelings. Nathan seemed to hesitate, aware of the public setting. Then, decision made, he gathered her into his arms, embracing her with a fervor that left no doubt about his feelings. Abigail returned the embrace without reservation, burying her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and soap and something uniquely Nathan. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, oblivious to the curious glances of those around them. "I've missed you," Nathan said simply. "And I you," Abigail replied. "More than I can say." Nathan glanced around at the busy office. "This isn't where I imagined our reunion. Let me collect my bags, and we can go somewhere quieter to talk." Once his luggage had been retrieved, they found a small cafe nearby that was relatively empty at this hour. Over coffee and sandwiches, Nathan shared the details of his trip that hadn't fit into his letters, and Abigail updated him on her new living arrangements and additional performances. "So you've moved to Mrs. Pemberton's," Nathan said, his expression neutral. "I hope it's comfortable." "Very," Abigail assured him. "And it's closer to the River Palace, which is convenient for my late-night returns. Mrs. Pemberton keeps a lamp burning for me, and there's always hot water for tea, no matter the hour. Nathan nodded. I'm glad. Though I admit, I was hoping to continue our daily breakfasts at the Orleans. We can still meet for meals, Abigail said quickly, not wanting him to think she was distancing herself. I just felt it was time I stood on my own feet financially. Understanding dawned in Nathan's eyes. Your independence is important to you. It is, Abigail confirmed. I've been dependent on others' charity or goodwill for too much of my life. Now that I'm earning a proper wage, I want to be self-sufficient. She reached across the table to touch his hand. But that doesn't mean I don't want you in my life. Quite the opposite. Nathan turned his hand to capture hers. I understand, and I respect your decision. He paused, then added, but I hope you know that anything I've offered or given has never been charity, Abigail. It's been an expression of my feelings for you, my desire to see you happy and secure. I do know that, Abigail replied softly, and I'm grateful for all of it. But for us to move forward together, I need to know that I'm bringing something of value to whatever this becomes. She gestured between them, still not quite ready to name what they were to each other. Nathan's expression grew serious. You bring everything of value, Abigail. Your talent, your courage, your kindness, your strength. Those things are worth far more than any material assistance I could offer. His words touched her deeply. Thank you for understanding. After they finished their meal, Nathan suggested they walk to the riverfront. The day was clear and mild, perfect for a stroll. As they walked, Nathan told her about the opportunities he'd discovered in San Francisco, the connections he'd made that might benefit their shipping business. Our primary focus will remain Sacramento, he explained, but having a stronger presence in San Francisco will allow us to expand our operations. It sounds promising, Abigail said. Will you need to travel there regularly? Nathan nodded. For the first year or so, yes. But once things are established, less frequently. He glanced at her. I was thinking that perhaps next time you might accompany me. The Musical Society concert will be over by then, and San Francisco has some remarkable theaters that I think would interest you. I'd like that, Abigail replied, warmed by the thought that he was including her in his future plans. They reached the riverfront and found a quiet spot to sit and watch the boats. The Sacramento River was busy with traffic steamboats, barges, smaller craft of all descriptions moving goods and people between the city and the wider world beyond. Abigail, Nathan said after they had been sitting in comfortable silence for a while. There's something I need to ask you. She turned to look at him, noting the seriousness in his expression. What is it? Nathan took both her hands in his gaze steady on hers. Before I left for San Francisco, I told you that I see a future for us together. My time away only strengthened that conviction. He took a deep breath. I know we've known each other a short time by conventional standards, but I also know what I feel for you is real and enduring. Abigail's heart began to race. Could this be? I'm not asking for an immediate answer, Nathan continued. I understand that you're just beginning to establish yourself here, to build the independent life you've worked toward. But I want you to know that I love you, Abigail Duncan, and when you're ready, I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife. Tears sprang to Abigail's eyes, happy tears that blurred her vision of Nathan's earnest face. Oh, Nathan, she breathed. Is that a yes? He asked, a note of uncertainty in his voice. Abigail laughed through her tears. Yes. Yes, it's a yes. I love you too, and I would be honored to be your wife. Joy blazed across Nathan's features. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally parted, both were smiling so widely it almost hurt. I have something for you, Nathan said, reaching into his coat pocket. He produced a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a ring, a delicate gold band set with a modest but perfect diamond. "I found this in San Francisco. I hope you like it." "It's beautiful," Abigail whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. The ring fit perfectly, as if made for her hand. "I love it." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, not firm arrangements, but happy speculations about what their future might hold. Nathan had a house in mind, a comfortable residence not far from the riverfront that would give them room to grow into. Abigail could continue her singing if she wished, or focus on other pursuits if that was her preference. "I want you to be happy," Nathan told her earnestly. "Whatever form that happiness takes." "I am happy," Abigail assured him, "happier than I've ever been. And a large part of that happiness is knowing that I can continue my music with your support." As the sun began to set, they reluctantly agreed it was time to part. Abigail needed to prepare for her performance at the River Palace, and Nathan had business matters to attend to after his absence. "May I announce our engagement this evening?" Nathan asked as they walked back toward the city center. Abigail nodded, a thrill running through her at the word engagement. "Yes, I'd like that." "Then I'll be there in the front row," Nathan promised, "the proudest man in Sacramento." That night, as Abigail sang at the River Palace, she felt as if she were floating on air. The ring on her finger caught the light occasionally, sending small rainbows dancing across the room. Nathan, true to his word, sat in the front row, his eyes never leaving her as she performed. After her final number, Nathan approached the small stage and, to her surprise, addressed the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I might have your attention for a moment, I have an announcement to make." The room quieted, curious faces turning toward him. "Today, this remarkable woman has done me the great honor of agreeing to become my wife," Nathan continued, extending his hand to Abigail, who joined him in front of the gathered diners. "I consider myself the most fortunate of men, and I would ask you to join me in celebrating our engagement." There was a moment of surprised silence, followed by enthusiastic applause and calls of congratulation. Mr. Thornton appeared with champagne, insisting on toasting the happy couple. Other diners came forward to offer their good wishes, many of them regular attendees who had come to appreciate Abigail's performances. It was, Abigail thought as she stood beside Nathan, accepting congratulations and sharing in his joy, a moment of pure happiness, a happiness she had not dared to imagine possible just a few short weeks ago. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Nathan and Abigail's engagement was announced in the Sacramento Daily Union, leading to a flurry of social invitations from Nathan's business associates and their wives. Abigail found herself welcomed into Sacramento society with a warmth she hadn't expected, her talent and charm opening doors that might otherwise have remained closed to a woman of her background. The musical society concert was a resounding success, with Abigail's performance receiving special mention in the newspaper's review. This led to additional opportunities, an invitation to sing at the governor's spring reception, an offer to perform with the newly formed Sacramento Orchestra, and even a suggestion that she might give private singing lessons to the daughters of prominent families. Nathan supported all of these endeavors wholeheartedly, taking evident pride in her accomplishments. He accompanied her to performances whenever possible, arranged for proper transportation when he couldn't, and never once suggested that her career might be secondary to their relationship. In turn, Abigail took an interest in Nathan's business affairs, offering insights that he valued and acting as hostess for business dinners that helped solidify important relationships. They made a good team, each complementing the other's strengths and supporting each other through challenges. Their wedding was set for June, when the weather would be warm but not yet unbearably hot. Mrs. Sullivan traveled from Downeyville for the occasion, as did Jenkins and several others who had shown Abigail kindness during her time there. Even Vernon Hargrove sent a congratulatory note, though whether out of genuine goodwill or a desire to curry favor with Nathan, who was becoming increasingly influential in regional business circles, was open to debate. The ceremony itself was simple but elegant. Held in the garden of the home, Nathan had purchased for them a handsome two-story residence with ample room for entertaining, and, as he pointed out with a meaningful look, for children someday. Abigail wore a gown of cream-colored silk, with the pearl pendant Nathan had given her at her throat and wildflowers in her hair. "You are the most beautiful bride I've ever seen," Nathan whispered as they exchanged vows before a small gathering of friends and associates. "And you are the most handsome groom," Abigail replied, her voice steady despite the emotions welling within her. The celebrations continued well into the evening, with music and dancing under lanterns hung from the garden trees. As the last guests departed, leaving the newlyweds alone in their new home, Abigail found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked as they stood together on the porch, watching the last carriage disappear down the street. "I was thinking about that night in Downeyville," Abigail replied honestly. "How close I came to freezing to death, and how you appeared like an answer to a prayer I hadn't even known I was making." Nathan's arm tightened around her waist. "I've often thought the same. What if I had decided to stop earlier that day? What if I had chosen a different route? What if I hadn't noticed that movement behind the crates?" "But you did," Abigail said softly, turning to face him. "You did notice, and you did save me, and here we are." She reached up to touch his face gently. "I believe some things are meant to be, Nathan. Some connections are written in the stars long before we realize it." "I believe that too," Nathan replied, bending to kiss her with a tenderness that still made her heart race. "And I'm grateful every day for whatever hand of fate brought you into my life." As they entered their home together, their home, where they would build their life, raise their children, grow old together, Abigail felt a sense of completion, of having found not just a place to belong but a person to belong with. The journey had been difficult at times, marked by loss and hardship, but it had led her here, to this man, to this love, to this future bright with promise, and that made every step worthwhile. 5 years later, the sound of laughter drifted through the open windows of the Wright home on a warm June evening. Inside, the dining room was filled with friends gathered to celebrate Nathan and Abigail's 5th wedding anniversary. Abigail, now a respected vocal instructor at the newly established Sacramento Conservatory of Music, as well as a regular performer with the city's orchestra, sat at one end of the table, their 3-year-old son Daniel on her lap. Nathan sat at the opposite end, deep in conversation with Mr. Calloway about their latest business venture, a railway investment that promised to further revolutionize transportation in the region. In the 5 years since their wedding, much had changed. Sacramento had grown exponentially, becoming a true city with all the amenities and challenges that entailed. Nathan's shipping company had expanded into other areas of transportation and commerce, making him one of the city's most successful businessmen. Abigail's career had flourished as well, her reputation as both a performer and teacher securing her a place in the city's cultural elite. Their greatest joy, however, was their family. Daniel had arrived 2 years into their marriage, a healthy, robust boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's musical inclinations. Even at 3, he showed a remarkable sense of rhythm and an ability to carry a tune that delighted Abigail. And now, Though only Nathan knew it yet, another child was on the way. Abigail had confirmed her suspicions just that morning and planned to tell Nathan tonight, after their guests had departed. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan caught her eye across the table and smiled that same warm, genuine smile that had first captured her heart in Mrs. Sullivan's sitting room all those years ago. Abigail returned the smile, her heart full of love for this man who had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined. Later, after the guests had gone and Daniel had been tucked into bed with a lullaby, Nathan and Abigail stood together on the porch, much as they had on their wedding night. The garden was in full bloom, the scent of roses heavy in the evening air. "Happy anniversary, my love," Nathan said, raising a glass of champagne in toast. 5 years that have been the best of my life. "And mine," Abigail replied, touching her water glass to his champagne, "though I expect the next 5 might be even better." Nathan raised an eyebrow at her choice of beverage. "No champagne tonight," Abigail smiled, taking his free hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "Not for the next several months, at least." Comprehension dawned in Nathan's eyes, followed by a joy so pure it took her breath away. "Abigail, are you certain?" she nodded, her own happiness mirrored in his face. "The doctor confirmed it this morning. We'll welcome our second child in winter." Nathan set aside his glass and gathered her into his arms, his embrace gentle yet fierce with emotion. "I love you," he whispered against her hair, "more than I can ever express." "And I love you," Abigail replied, secure in the knowledge that this love born in the bitter cold of a Downeyville winter and tempered in the warmth of their shared life would sustain them through whatever the future might hold. As they stood together in the moonlight, Abigail thought once more of that fateful night when a locked door and freezing temperatures had nearly ended her life. Instead, they had led her to Nathan, to love, to a family and future beyond her wildest dreams. Sometimes, she reflected as Nathan led her back inside to the warmth of their home, the harshest circumstances could lead to the greatest blessings. And sometimes, a broken window could open the way to a whole new life.